It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to another episode of the SEC Recap Podcast. This is our Week 8 Power Rankings, Week 7 reaction episode. This is actually my second attempt at this morning. Just had a stream error on the first attempt, but we're giving it a second go. Lots to get through. We'll try to keep this one short and sweet. I'm sitting down here with you live on Monday morning. As usual, this will be pushed to standard video and podcast formats a little bit later on, but however you're choosing to join us, whenever you're choosing to sit down and listen to this, if you're here on YouTube, I appreciate you being here. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys so much. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at SEC Recap. Check out my website. All the content goes there first before it ever hits socials, secrecap.com, especially that stats page. Excuse me. And, but if you love listening in audio form, there's a few great podcast platforms out there that do offer the video-based podcast. I know Spotify does, YouTube Music does. So however you prefer to chug your podcasts, I thank you for sitting down with me and sharing in these episodes. So if you're new to this episode, this has definitely been this brand of episode has been one of the more successful for me since starting this podcast 3 years ago. But going through the power rankings, kind of showing off the power rankings model, and then looking at a few key efficiency stats that I incorporate into this model. It's not the only thing that I use, but it tells a large part of the story that some other rankings models don't capture. And with the release of the latest AP rankings yesterday, naturally, some teams rise, some teams fall in those vote-based rankings. I feel it's important to share, even though we are just focusing on the SEC here, to focus on metrics-based rankings as a preferred measure of, whether you're power ranking or just ranking teams in general. It tells a better story. Rather than just how you feel about a team, you're actually using their on-field performance, whether season average, week to week, or conference play, to kind of tell the story. And I actually drilled down a little bit deeper this week, and we're just going to look at these SEC teams in conference play rather than those season averages. Now that most SEC teams have at least 2 conference games played, we're getting a little bit more clear of a picture as to what we can expect moving forward for the back half of the season. We're now officially halfway through the 2024 season. And so we're starting to see that some teams are just the way they are. We kind of keep hoping, through week 3, week 4, hey, maybe they're going to fix this. Maybe they're going to turn things around. But injuries start to mount up. Your personnel on the field changes. The disbursement of your talent that you have on the offense and defense looks a little bit different. So you also have to adjust your expectations based on that. So anyway, without further ado, we'll get right into the rankings here, and then we'll talk some of those advanced stats. We'll deep dive into that just a little bit at the end for you stat hungry nerds out there. All right. So staying at the 16th spot, Mississippi State Bulldogs. This is my model score here that you see on screen, that 10.53. And I put that on there so you can compare, for example, how my model number versus ESPN's FPI. And that is available right on my website, secrecap.com/stats. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, I always post a side-by-side. I just popped it into a spreadsheet and clip it for you there, but you can go to that sheet if you want. There's not much on there, but for example, ESPN has Mississippi State rated in their FPI as a 2, and it's a really good scoring margin system. But it's a little inconsistent when you're just trying to work on power rankings. For example, if you just power rank teams based on who has the better FPI, you're not going to get the best results. And in fact, we can see that, right? In the FPI, Ole Miss is 21.6, LSU is 14.6. That's a 7-point margin difference, but LSU beat Ole Miss at home by 6 points or 4 points, maybe there in overtime. So it's a decent point margin system, but not the best power ranking system. That's the reason I kind of show you the difference here. Staying at the number 15 spot, Auburn Tigers, their score 29.77. Now you can see the really big gap still between 15 and 16. Mississippi State is just that bad. And I'll pause when we finish the the bottom half of the conference, and I'll show you some of those efficiency numbers to show you visually where all those teams sit in terms of offensive and defensive efficiency. But 29.77 at the 15 spot versus a 10 point, whatever that was at the 16 spot. It's a pretty wide gap. Dropping one spot to number 14. Now we continue to see a little bit of shuffling here, 11 through 15 or 11 through 14. Minor shuffling. Again, these scores are pretty close, but you still see a little bit of shuffling in this 11 through 14. Whereas the top of the conference, the bottom of the conference are really starting to be pretty much set at this point. But a 39.61 for the South Carolina Gamecocks compared to their FPI score of 9.2. They lose a tough one on the road to Alabama. Let me talk about the previous two real quick. Sorry. It is Monday morning. Auburn had a bye week, so the model didn't really do anything with them. It's not going to punish you for not playing, but it's not really going to reward you for not playing either. It might adjust some teams around you, but it's not going to change you that much. Mississippi State actually had a great game with Georgia. Georgia hangs on and wins that game at home, 41-31. But let's talk about the Mississippi State passing game really quick. I wanted to talk about that because this is a reaction episode, and I almost just completely glossed over it. The Bulldogs were in there with the Bulldogs. It was a dogfight in Sanford Stadium. Mississippi State ends up throwing for 306 yards, only 79 on the ground. And you're going to find that when you're looking at stats that correlate with win totals, defensive efficiency, first of all, and then your rushing efficiency. Turnover margin is in there as well. But those three stats specifically correlate really highly with win totals. So you look at that 305 stat line through the air for Mississippi State, you thought, man, they were, must have been hanging in there. And they were, but they weren't moving the ball on the ground at all. On the other hand, Georgia, 146 on the ground, 459 through the air. They were just able to do it a little bit better there. Carson Beck had to throw 48 passes. That included 3 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. We'll talk about the Georgia side when we get to them. But I just want to say the Bulldogs were in there with a really, really good Georgia team. Probably not the Georgia team that we expected to get this year, but commendations to Mississippi State Bulldogs. All right, back to South Carolina. They lose a road game in Tuscaloosa, 2-point game. The final here, 27-25, Crimson Tide. And South Carolina really had a chance to put this one away here at the end. Lenora Sellers goes for 238 through the air. That includes 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was pretty good. He kept him in that game. He also, he threw the interception at the end, so he's probably the reason they kind of lost that game too. But they put up 132 on the ground, 242 total through the air. They did lose 2 fumbles, and they had, the pick there. So again, the turnovers don't help you, especially in a road game against a top 10 team that you really had a chance of beating. So tough one there. They tried to gut it out the best they can. I think the bright spot is obviously South Carolina's defense doing the most for that team. We have a couple other teams like that in the league. We'll talk about them when we get there, where the defense is the bright spot, and the offense isn't quite doing enough to really deserve what the defense is giving them. But 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks against that Alabama offensive line. Alabama, Jalen Milroe goes for 209 through the air. They only get 104 on the ground. So South Carolina's run defense really, really stout there, but they fall just a little bit short. Gamecocks now 3-3 on the year, 1-3 in conference play. And so they're kind of sliding into a tough stretch here. Now, bumping a spot, just one. They were at 14 last week. They jumped to number 13 this week. The Florida Gators. Really, really close road loss in Knoxville at Neyland Stadium at night. Their score here in my model, 40.6. That puts them just literally 1 point better than the Gamecocks. So this 13-14 is really, really close. And really 11 through 14 are spread by just like 2 points. So don't get bent out too much. If you were 12, then you're 14, or you're 13, then you're 11. It's really not that much movement. Now, the narrative around this game, from what I've seen for the most part, is like the Billy Napier coaching blunders. Like, oh, Billy Napier coaching cost him the game. There were a couple of those. End of the first half, the 12 men on the field for the field goal attempt, or whatever was happening there. There was some of that. Okay. Uh, but that's not why Florida lost to Tennessee. Florida lost to Tennessee because of Tennessee's defense. Tennessee's defense was elite once again. The downside to Tennessee still continues to be that offense. That offense is not playing at the same level that defense is. And I think that's the most surprising thing to most people. But this is a vertical defense, and they gave it to Florida, man. Florida, under Graham Mertz, before he was injured and went out, possibly out for the rest of the season. I don't know. We'll see. They were very efficient. I mean, they were definitely moving the ball. They were moving it on the ground. They were moving it through the air, through that kind of dink and dunk style that we knew that they would do. But Florida rushes for 138. They throw for 223. Definitely more efficient in the passing game than the Vols. Both teams had a couple of turnovers, both a pick and a fumble. But here's the storyline. Tennessee defense, 12 tackles for loss. 12 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. It just felt like anytime Florida Gators got something going, even in the red zone. I mean, they were terrible in the red zone, but it wasn't due to coaching, guys. It was the defense. Tennessee's defense bent, but they didn't break. They're really, really good at not allowing points in the red zone, especially when you're trying to run it on them. Florida's defense, pretty good as well. Honestly, they gave Tennessee's offense all they could handle. 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks on Nico. Felt like 2 or 3 of those came like back to back to back too. And you just thought like, man, Nico can't keep just sitting in the pocket. Like this Gators defense is just going to get to him all game long. So most people kind of expected, because of the nature of this rivalry, this was going to be a really, really close game despite the 15-point spread. My number was actually a little wider than that. I never felt great about it, though. I just felt that Tennessee needed to be able to put like 200 on the ground to kind of run away with that game at a 15-point spread. They never did that. They couldn't get that going. So close one for Florida, ends in overtime off a Tennessee walk-off touchdown, 23-17 final score. Florida did manage a late touchdown to tie the game with like 30 seconds left to go. So Tennessee almost had that game put away. Florida snuck one in on their defense to put it into overtime. Thought they would go for 2. Sorry, my voice doing funny things this morning. Thought they would go for 2. They didn't. They tie it and choose to go to overtime. And I think at that point, the crowd was in it. It was just a mistake there for the Florida Gators. All right, dropping a spot from 11 to 12 this week, score of 41.49. The Kentucky Wildcats, they lose at home to my number 11 team of the week. So let's just go ahead and pop that in there too. The Vanderbilt Commodores, 41.98. Vandy gets another SEC win, this time a road win. I thought this would be a comeback to earth game for Vandy. It was not. Of course, Kentucky defense held them a little bit more in check. Final score here, 20-13. It was not like a 40-point thriller like they had versus Alabama. Brock Vandagriff continues to be basically average for Kentucky, while Diego Pavia did exactly what you thought he would do. I mean, he's not going to throw long passes. They're not shoving it down the field, but they're going to be really efficient. They're going to dink and dunk their way into the end zone on you. It's just they're playing a really niche kind of offense with him at the helm, and he runs it really, really well. Vandy puts up 145 on the ground, 143 through the air. Very, very balanced. Kentucky also balanced, 164 on the ground, 158 through the air. Vanderbilt, not a super disruptive defense. They do enough to kind of, keep you out of the end zone. Kentucky defense still has 6 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. Um, a fumble by Dane Key. That's a big one. I know a lot of Kentucky fans were talking about after the game as a missed opportunity for points. Kentucky continues to slide a little bit here after that big Ole Miss win, 3-3 on the year, 1-3 in conference. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt 2-1 in conference, 4-2 on the year. Their only conference loss, by the way, that really, really close, I think, overtime loss to Mizzou on the road. So Vanderbilt ascending, Kentucky sliding. This is the state of the SEC in 2024. All right. At number 10, they were also on a bye week this week. The Arkansas Razorbacks, 47.58. Model doesn't really move them. It doesn't really shuffle anything around them either. It doesn't punish you for not playing, but it doesn't bump you for not losing either. At number 9, Mizzou, they say put this week as well, 50.25. Just to give you an idea of where we are where we're still sitting at the bottom half of the conference here. Mizzou 50.25 versus Mississippi State back at 16, 10.53. However, 9 to 10, there's about a 3-point difference, 2.5 3-point difference. Okay. And 9 to 11, so Mizzou over Vandy, about a 8.5 point difference. Okay. So that's where we are as we get to the top half here. Now, I want to pause really quickly before we do the top 8, discuss that a little bit differently. First of all, we're going to talk stats, but I want to plug my merch really quick. If you've not been to my Bonfire store, head on over, check out my Bonfire store, bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. Check out all the great merch. I've got something for every SEC team over there, including some fun stuff like this Big Doinks Energy t-shirt. Comes in short sleeve, long sleeve, sweatshirt, hoodie, all of the styles do. Got a variety of colors in all the merchandise as well. Guys, it's that super soft premium cotton. Everything fits great. It feels great. I've got the Big Doinks Energy myself. I love wearing it around town. It always gets a laugh out of people. So show your love for Big Doinks with the Big Doink Energy tee. Again, check out all that stuff at bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. You can always find a link through my website as well, secrecap.com. We're going to switch over here too and look at some of these efficiency metrics in a little bit different way. Let me get myself out of the way here. All right. So this is our offensive and defensive efficiency charts that I post every week, except this time it's for conference play only. Now that every SEC team has played at least 2 conference games, I feel like it's important to look at how all the teams are performing in conference and those conference averages versus the season averages, because a lot of the season averages, guys, are still skewed by most of these teams playing 3 weeks of really, really weak opponents. So what you're going to see here, and we're going to compare the week 7 performance that we just had for some of these teams. First of all, look at your outliers, right? You got Mizzou up here in the top left, which is as bad as it gets. It's really, really bad. Mizzou has been bad in conference play. They played a close one with Vandy at home. They got obliterated by Texas A&M. They're 1-1 in the conference, okay? Then you have Mississippi State, who, is the standout worst team in the SEC, especially defensively. They are 0-3 in conference. And then let's go to the bottom right. This is your elite tier. We have the Texas Longhorns as kind of your standout elite offensive and defensive team. Elite is this bottom right quadrant, guys, if you're new to this episode. Top left is the worst of the worst. So you actually want to be in this bottom right. The red line here that you see on your screen is the defensive conference average. You want to be below that defensively. And then the blue line is your offensive conference average. You want to be above that. Okay. Um, so anyway, this is kind of the snapshot here. Now, some of these teams have played 2. Some of these teams have played 4. Most of these teams have played 3 games. So take that with a grain of salt. Okay. Not all of these teams have played the same number of games. However, it starts to paint a clearer picture. I will say Texas has only played Mississippi State and Oklahoma, which just so happened to be the worst offensive and the worst defensive team in the conference. Now, most people have no issue saying that Texas is far and away the best team in the SEC. I would actually agree with you there, but do understand what you're looking at here. The only 2 SEC games they've played, if we're looking at, these results relative to conference play, they've only played the worst offense and the worst defense. They do get Georgia coming up this week. Okay. So it's at home, but we'll learn a little bit more about Texas depending on what the outcome of that win looks like. Texas A&M continues to be really good. Okay. They just have the 1 loss on the season to USC. They continue to look really, really strong in conference play. Then you have this cluster of teams right around the conference averages. These are your 1 and 2 loss teams, except for LSU. I thought Ole Miss would get them. I thought Ole Miss would get them. Some people call me out on Twitter. That's fine. At least I put my opinion out there. Most people aren't willing to do that, but I still think there's some question marks for LSU here. I think they have another couple losses coming in conference, just by the way their efficiencies sit. Okay, Garrett Nussmeier's having to throw 50 passes a game. That's going to come back on you at some point. Teams with big question marks offensively, obviously Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Oklahoma. Like, this is not where Tennessee wants to be, okay? In terms of offensive efficiency. Their defense continues to be really, really good. South Carolina, Tennessee, A&M, Texas, even Ole Miss, very, very good defensively. But you see the struggles on offense out of these teams here. Tennessee has to play Alabama coming up in week 8, right? Alabama continues to be very, very good offensively, especially in conference play. They have not been great defensively. We'll kind of see how that balances out here, right? And then you have Vanderbilt just outside this little conference cluster here. Just 1 loss, 1 conference loss, that one to Mizzou. But it kind of looks like they should probably have an additional one. They should not have won that game versus Alabama based on their efficiencies. But coulda, woulda, shoulda, they did, right? But based on where they sit, I think Vanderbilt's going to have a couple conference losses coming their way. Texas, probably one of them. South Carolina, maybe. We'll see. That's always a good game there. But yeah, think Vandy's kind of Cinderella run might be pumping the brakes here very soon, just based on where the efficiencies sit. Now, really quickly, before we get back to the power ratings, guys, let's look at the week 7 performances. Actually, let's look at them relative to, I have a separate graphic here. Let me go back, share this. This one. Yep. So we can do a side-by-side comparison here. Get myself out of the way. So week 7 performance versus the conference average. Mississippi State, right where you think they should be, right? They performed right on par with their average in conference games. Texas was basically right on par with their average in conference games. Oklahoma, right on par offensively, just a little worse, but way worse defensively. Tennessee actually performed right on par offensively with where they have been in conference play. That was versus Arkansas versus Florida. But Florida happened to be way worse offensively thanks to Tennessee's defense. That Tennessee defense really, like I said, that's the reason that Florida lost the game. It was not because of Billy Napier, despite what Florida fans want to say. It was because of Tennessee's defense. Then you continue to have this cluster of like Ole Miss, LSU, right there around the conference average. Georgia uh, underperformed offensively, or sorry, overperformed offensively, but underperformed defensively, allowing Mississippi State to put up 31. Mizzou here, I'm not worried about. Mizzou played UMass, so I'm not really comparing a UMass game against conference play here. South Carolina in week 7 outperformed their conference play average. They performed really, really well offensively versus that Alabama defense. Alabama underperformed offensively. Defensively, Alabama was right on par with their conference average. So, guys, again, if you're just listening to this in podcast form, God bless you, but you really need to be able to see this stuff. So head on over to YouTube, SEC Recap on YouTube, or go to YouTube Music or Spotify, where you can actually get this in video form and you can see the side by sides here. I've got the nice scatters with the team logos ranking their offensive and defensive efficiency. It makes so much more sense. It visualizes the team's on-field performance, right? So you could kind of see, okay, in week 7, yeah, Tennessee was really bad offensively compared to where they should be, or where they've been playing in conference, or they were really elite defensively, even compared to how they normally play in conference play. So this is going to provide us a really good baseline moving forward, not just in reflecting and looking at how each team performed, but what we can expect moving forward. It's why I continue to have question marks about LSU, guys, just because of where they sit efficiency wise, where this suggests that they should be. This suggests they should have 1 or 2 losses by now, and they don't. So something's going to correct there. All right. I've spent enough time on that. Let's go back to our power ratings. Give me a second. We had just finished the back half of the conference. We're going to go back and look at the top half, starting with our number 8 team, who, again, no movement this week. That is going to be your Oklahoma Sooners. They lose to Texas in pathetic fashion, 34-3, which I kind of expected would happen. I picked Texas to cover that spread there. But the Oklahoma, we just looked at it. Worst offense in the SEC, statistically worst offense in the SEC. So no surprise that Texas, with that defense, shuts them out. But 89 yards rushing, 148 passing. You cough the ball up a couple times. Like, that's not going to do it. It's not going to do it. Oklahoma having some struggles in the SEC in year 1. Texas thriving. LSU, the model does not move them. And I think it's because of where Ole Miss sits in my power rankings model relative to LSU. I mean, it was a good win. It was a good win at home. But efficiency-wise, these teams were not all too different in conference play. So it wasn't a massive upset in those terms. Both of these teams actually play right about the same in conference play in terms of offensive and defensive efficiency. 58.91, my model ranking for LSU. So they stay at number 7. 29-26 final score there in overtime. Ole Miss hits a long field goal to take the lead, and literally first play of the possession, Garrett Nussmeier throws a dart to the end zone for the walk-off touchdown there. Jackson Dart, 24 of 42 for 284 yards. Garrett Nussmeier, 22 of 51, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like, yeah, these guys are slinging it, but their completion percentage is like, right around 50%. It's not great. LSU, 84 yards on the ground against that Ole Miss defense. It's about what I expected. 337 through the air. LSU never led in this game. They never led in this game. And then they win it in overtime. When I previewed this one, I said, LSU Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin versus Brian Kelly. Which one of these coaches is going to blow it? Well, now we know it's Lane Kiffin. He can't win a big game to save his life. They dumped all that money into NIL, brought in all those players, dump the whole bag in. They can't win a big game. He just can't win a big game. They coasted on 5 weeks of playing nobodies. And then when they get into conference play and have to play teams with the pulse, they just can't do it. That's all I really feel about saying on there. Number 6, Texas A&M. Believe they had a bye week. Again, so the model doesn't move or drop them. 65.4 there. Kind of a standout above where LSU sits, a good like 7 points or so higher than the Tigers. We'll talk about them more next week. They didn't do anything this week. Ole Miss, number 5, the model leaves them put 2, although their score drops a few points. I think they were closer to 80 last week. They're at a 74.37, whereas LSU score was a little bit higher. So reverting to the mean here, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just kind of recapped that. Ole Miss, like, can't win a big game. Who do they have coming up next week? Let's see. Week 8. I think they get a bye week. Yeah, and they need a bye week too. They played 7 straight. So they have a bye week. We'll kind of reassess them coming out of the bye here in a couple weeks to see what they look like moving forward. No movement at number 4. Tennessee Vols, 77.53. Model still likes them quite a bit better than Ole Miss, A&M, LSU, despite the offensive struggles. Already recapped that Florida game, so not going to rehash that here. But that continues to be the biggest surprise. The offensive line not getting any push, subpar defenses being able to blow them off the ball. And not get that running game going, which, of course, affects their ability to open it up in the pass. Question marks why Brew McCoy is not more involved in the passing game. Dante Thornton, Chris Braz, like you just want to see more. And at this point, a lot of people are asking it. We'll ask the same question. Why is Mike Matthews not on the field? If none of the guys on the field are really getting it done, I mean, Chaz Nimrod, there was kind of that fourth guy. He dropped 3 balls that hit his hands. I'll give him one of those as maybe, having to lay out for it. But even on short passes, balls were dropping, were hitting his hands and falling out. Get Mike Matthews on the field. 5-star freshman. There's no reason why he shouldn't be seeing more time in this offense, especially with the way that it's struggling. A big one coming up this week, 3rd Saturday in October versus the Crimson Tide. I'm not going to go too deep into that right now because I'm going to save it for the preview episode. But something's got to give here. Either Tennessee's offense has to step up to the level of its defense, because I don't think you could continue to put that defense in spots like they've been asked to do all season and expect them to win you ball games, especially against Alabama's offense. That's still a really, really good offense. Little bit of a shuffle here in the top 3. Georgia falls to the number 3 spot after that close win at home over Mississippi State, who is definitively the worst team in the SEC. And I think that's why the model is dinging them here this week. 80.67, though. Still several spots above Tennessee, but not the same Georgia team that I think we were all expecting. This is a beatable, gettable Georgia team for a lot of teams in this conference. Really interested to see what happens on the road this week in Austin, Texas. Then jumping the spot to number 2. Sorry, I forgot to change the graphic here. It says number 3. It's number 2, 81.88. It is very, very close. Just a 1-point difference between them and the Georgia Bulldogs. Alabama. Now, I don't like this. A 2-point win versus South Carolina. However, in the model, it likes that win over South Carolina, who is a definitively better team than the 10-point Georgia win over Mississippi State, who, they were 3-score favorites over. So I think that's why you're seeing the shuffle here. But point-wise, Alabama 81.88 versus Georgia 80.67. It's barely a point, just a little over a point difference there. The biggest spread, once again, continues to be the Texas Longhorns, the standouts in the SEC, 94.02, far and away the best team in my model and the best team in the SEC. and it's not particularly close. Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, doesn't matter. They've got the offensive weapons. They've got the defensive weapons. Year one in the SEC, the Texas Longhorns brought everything to the table, and it is paying off for them. We have a big week coming up, y'all. We have a massive week coming up. Third Saturday in October, but it is no longer just for Tennessee and Alabama. We got the Georgia Bulldogs heading to Austin, Texas for the night game. Think about that, guys. We have an 11-on-7 ranked matchup, Tennessee-Alabama in Neyland, and that's not even the night game. It's going to be number 5 Georgia versus number 1 Texas on the night game. So that is going to be a loaded slate. We're going to be here to recap it all for you on the preview episodes this week. Thanks for tuning in. Again, like, subscribe, follow us. Have a great week. I'll catch you on the previews. Peace.